I work for a secret tunnel mapping unit. Something is digging back. The Subterranean Cartography Division occupied a nondescript government building in St. Paul, Minnesota. Its true purpose hidden behind the mundane facade of geological survey offices. Inside, however, past security checkpoints and reinforced doors, lay one of the nation's most specialized mapping operations. Dr. Abigail Foster paced the length of the central operations room, her thin frame casting long shadows in the blue glow of monitoring screens. At 47, she had spent nearly half her life studying what lay beneath the surface of America. What had begun as a legitimate geological safety initiative, mapping abandoned mines, natural cave systems, and forgotten Cold War bunkers, had evolved into something far more clandestine under her direction. "The new specialist is here," announced her assistant, sliding a personnel file across the desk. Dr. Foster glanced at the photograph. Michael Torres, 34, former Army Corps of Engineers, experience in subterranean structure assessment, following the collapse of a military storage facility in Nevada. "Perfect. Send him in," she said, straightening her lab coat. First impressions mattered. Michael Torres entered with the measured gait of a soldier, taking in the room with calculated glances. 6'2" with shoulders that suggested regular physical training, dark hair cut short, eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Foster noticed how he immediately located all exits and assessed the personnel present, old habits from his military days. "Welcome to SCD, Mr. Torres," she said, extending her hand. "I trust your security briefing was thorough." "Thorough enough to know this isn't just about mapping old mines," he replied, his handshake firm but not aggressive, "but vague enough that I have questions." Foster almost smiled. "Good. Questions mean you're paying attention. You'll have level 3 clearance for now. That covers our standard operations. The rest," she gestured to the sealed door at the far end of the room, "that comes with time." Over the next 3 months, Michael proved his worth. He adapted quickly to the specialized equipment, ground-penetrating radar units modified beyond commercial specifications, seismic sensors capable of detecting movement through solid rock, and acoustic mapping systems that created three-dimensional renderings of subterranean spaces. His team mapped abandoned iron mines in northern Minnesota, limestone caverns in southern Illinois, and a forgotten subway expansion beneath Milwaukee. Each mission followed the same protocol: map, document, secure, move on. The data disappeared into classified servers. Reports went to nameless officials, and new assignments arrived with little explanation. It was during a routine debriefing after the Milwaukee operation that Michael first heard the term subsurface anomaly. Team 4 encountered another anomaly in the Tennessee system. Dr. Foster told her senior staff, unaware that Michael was within earshot. "That's the third this month along the eastern section." "Same pattern?" asked a geologist, whose name Michael couldn't recall. "Identical. Perfect cylindrical passages, no debris, unusual thermal signatures, and again, no record of any mining or construction in the area." "Natural formation," suggested someone else. Dr. Foster's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Nothing natural makes tunnels like that." The conversation ended abruptly when they noticed Michael. He was quickly assigned to a new operation in northern Wisconsin, but the exchange lingered in his mind. What kind of anomalies required such secrecy? What made tunnels that experienced geologists couldn't explain? His chance to find out came sooner than expected. While investigating an abandoned iron mine designated Site 37, deep in Minnesota's Mesabi Range, Diane Kellerman, the team's seismologist, called him over to her monitoring station. "You need to see this," she said, turning her screen toward him. The display showed seismic readings, faint but distinctive patterns, repeating every 47 seconds. "Construction nearby," Michael suggested. Diane shook her head, tucking a strand of gray-streaked hair behind her ear. "We're too deep, too isolated. Besides, these aren't impact tremors. They're," she hesitated, "more like pressure waves, as if something's moving through the surrounding rock." "Something big," Michael observed, noting the amplitude, "and getting closer." They reported the findings to Dr. Foster, who arrived within hours, bringing additional equipment and personnel. For 3 days, they monitored the vibrations, which grew incrementally stronger, but never manifested into anything visible. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, the vibrations stopped. "Pack it up," ordered Dr. Peterson, the field supervisor. "Department wants us to move on to Site 38. Michael caught Dr. Foster staring at the final readings, her expression troubled. "You don't think we should leave?" he said. It wasn't a question. "What I think doesn't matter," she replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "The Department of Energy signs our checks, and they say there's nothing here worth investigating further." "The Department of Energy?" Michael raised an eyebrow. "I thought we reported to Interior." Dr. Foster's eyes narrowed slightly, realizing her slip. "We have multiple oversight agencies, Mr. Torres. That's all you need to know at your clearance level." Before leaving Site 37, they installed long-term monitoring equipment, seismic sensors, temperature gauges, and atmospheric monitors, housed in a reinforced concrete bunker. Standard procedure, Michael was told, though the installation seemed more extensive than any he'd helped set up previously. 2 weeks later, during a mapping operation at an abandoned salt mine in Michigan, Michael noticed an unusual tension among the senior staff. Hushed conversations ceased when he approached. Equipment was rerouted from his team to another site without explanation. Something had happened, something significant. It was Diane who finally told him, finding him alone in the equipment room late one night. "They lost contact with the monitoring station at Site 37, she whispered, glancing toward the door. All signals went dead simultaneously. "Equipment failure?" Michael suggested. "That's what they're saying officially." Diane leaned closer. "But I saw the last data transmission. The seismic sensors picked up those vibrations again, stronger than before, much stronger, and then something else." She hesitated. "What?" The final reading showed a massive pressure wave moving upward, directly beneath the monitoring station. Then nothing. Her eyes met his, filled with an anxiety he hadn't seen in the usually composed scientist. "Michael, whatever made those tunnels Dr. Foster is so interested in, I think it came back." The next morning, a recovery team was assembled. Michael volunteered immediately, ignoring the warning look from Dr. Peterson. To his surprise, Dr. Foster approved his participation with a simple nod. As their transport helicopter approached Site 37, Michael gazed down at the forested landscape of northern Minnesota, the scattered lakes reflecting the morning sun like shattered mirrors. Somewhere below, hidden beneath tons of rock and soil, something had triggered every alarm the SCD possessed. Something that, if Diane's theory was correct, was no longer content to be merely observed. Something that had begun to dig back. The recovery team descended into Site 37 with military precision, 6 specialists, including Michael, each carrying specialized equipment and sidearms, an unusual addition that hadn't been part of previous operations. Dr. Foster led personally, her typical lab coat exchanged for tactical gear that seemed well worn, suggesting this wasn't her first recovery mission. The main shaft elevator lowered them 200 feet into darkness. The only sound the mechanical whir of cables and the rhythmic drip of groundwater. Michael noticed how the others kept glancing at their seismic monitors, how fingers hovered near weapons. Nobody spoke. "Stay alert," Dr. Foster finally said as they reached the bottom. "Standard sweep pattern. Teams of 2. Torres, you're with me." Michael nodded, surprised at being paired with the director. They proceeded through the main tunnel, boot steps echoing off stone walls lined with rusting support beams. Their headlamps cast long shadows that seemed to move independently in the periphery of vision. The monitoring station had been established in a natural cavern, half a mile from the main shaft. As they approached, Michael detected an odd smell. Metallic, like ozone after lightning, mixed with something organic he couldn't place. "Do you smell that?" he asked. Dr. Foster nodded tightly. It was in the Tennessee system too, and the Wisconsin site. Before Michael could ask what she meant, they rounded the final bend, and the monitoring station came into view. Or rather, what remained of it. The reinforced concrete bunker had been breached from below. its foot-thick floor shattered as if it were eggshell. 3 perfect circular holes, each approximately 3 feet in diameter, gaped in the concrete. "Jesus," whispered Michael, playing his light across the destruction. The expensive monitoring equipment wasn't damaged or scattered, as would be expected in a collapse or explosion. It was simply gone, along with sections of the power cables, metal support beams, and even the aluminum legs of the chair, where a technician would have sat had the station been manned. "Start scanning," ordered Dr. Foster, her voice steady despite the impossible scene before them. Full spectrum. The team deployed their equipment with practiced efficiency, though Michael noticed the tremor in some hands. Radiation detectors, thermal imaging, spectroscopic analyzers. They threw everything at the site, while Dr. Foster documented methodically. The holes continued down at least 40 meters before curving eastward, reported a technician operating ground-penetrating radar. "The tunnel walls are unusual." "Define unusual," said Dr. Foster. "Perfectly smooth, almost glassy." The technician adjusted his settings. "It's as if the surrounding material was liquefied and then resolidified." Michael knelt at the edge of one hole, shining his light into the perfect cylinder that descended into darkness. The walls, indeed, had an unnatural smoothness, reflecting his light with an almost wet appearance, despite being completely dry to the touch. "No tool marks," he observed. "No debris. Whatever made this removed the material completely rather than displacing it." "Or consumed it," murmured Dr. Foster, so quietly he almost missed it. As the team continued their assessment, Michael noticed a small object half embedded in the wall of one hole. Carefully, he extracted what appeared to be a memory chip from one of their monitoring devices, partially melted on one side. "Dr. Foster," he called, holding up his find. "I think this is from our seismic recorder." She took it with gloved hands, examining it under a portable microscope she extracted from her pack. "The connectors have been removed," she said, "precisely excised. The gold conductive elements as well." She looked up at Michael, her expression unreadable. "They're getting more selective." "They?" Michael repeated. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Dr. Foster straightened, seeming to come to a decision. "You've earned a higher clearance, Torres. When we return to base, you'll be briefed fully." She gestured to the holes. "This isn't a geological phenomenon, and it isn't isolated." The team spent 3 more hours documenting the site before placing new, more sophisticated monitoring equipment, including what Michael recognized as military-grade motion sensors around the perimeter of the breach. No one ventured into the holes themselves, per Dr. Foster's explicit orders. During the helicopter ride back to headquarters, Michael studied the director's face in the shifting light. The usual intensity was there, but now mixed with something else. Not fear exactly, but a deep, gnawing concern that made her look suddenly older than her years. "How long has this been happening?" he asked, when the noise of the rotors made private conversation possible. "The first confirmed incident was 5 years ago, an abandoned coal mine in Pennsylvania," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "At first, we thought it was isolated, perhaps related to some forgotten mining technique or secret military testing. And now we've documented 17 similar occurrences across the United States." She met his gaze directly. "All with the same characteristics: perfect cylindrical tunnels, selective removal of technological components, and no trace of whatever creates them." Back at headquarters, Michael received his Level 5 security clearance, the highest available to field operatives, and was escorted to a secure briefing room 2 floors below the main operations center. Dr. Foster waited, with a small team of senior researchers and a military officer Michael hadn't seen before. "This is Colonel Hayes, Department of Defense Liaison," Dr. Foster introduced. "He'll be overseeing the expanded operation." The lights dimmed, and a large display screen showed a map of the United States overlaid with 17 red dots, concentrated primarily in the northern and eastern regions. "These are our confirmed sites," Dr. Foster began. "The pattern was random at first, or so we thought, but after the 12th incident, we identified this." She pressed a button, and a curved line appeared, connecting the dots in a sweeping arc from northern Minnesota through Wisconsin, skirting Chicago, and continuing through Indiana, Kentucky, and terminating in the Appalachians of eastern Tennessee. "We call it the resonance line," she continued. "Every incident has occurred within 8 kilometers of this arc, and they're increasing in frequency." "What's causing it?" Michael asked, studying the pattern. Colonel Hayes spoke for the first time, his voice graveled by years of command. "That's what you're going to help us determine, Mr. Torres. Whatever it is, the Pentagon is concerned enough to triple our funding and personnel." "We have theories," added Dr. Foster, "but very little concrete evidence. What we do know is that these entities, we call them diggers for obvious reasons, are intelligent, methodical, and specifically interested in our technology." The briefing continued for hours as Michael absorbed the classified history of the SCD's true mission. It had begun as a legitimate geological survey, but had transformed after the first encounter with the diggers. Now it served as the front line in what Colonel Hayes bluntly called a potential non-terrestrial threat assessment. "Non-terrestrial?" Michael questioned. "You think they're aliens?" "We think they're not human," corrected Dr. Foster. "Beyond that, we're keeping all possibilities open. They could be an unknown terrestrial species, some form of autonomous technology, or yes, potentially extraterrestrial in origin." As the briefing concluded, Michael was presented with his new assignment. He would join the primary research team under Dr. Foster's direct supervision, focusing on potential communication strategies and threat assessment. "One last thing," Dr. Foster said as the others filed out. "The monitoring station at Site 37 recorded something just before it went offline." She played an audio file, a series of rhythmic pulses that rose and fell in a pattern too regular to be natural, too complex to be random. "What is that?" Michael asked, feeling the hairs rise on the back of his neck. "We think it might be language," she replied, her eyes reflecting the blue light of the screen. "And if it is, that means they're not just taking our technology, they're trying to talk to us." As Michael left the briefing room, his mind reeling from the implications, he passed a laboratory where technicians in hazmat suits examined a small object behind thick glass, the memory chip he had found, now disassembled under powerful microscopes. One technician looked up as Michael paused, and the man's expression was enough to send a chill through him. It wasn't scientific curiosity on the man's face, it was dread. The expanded operation transformed the SCD almost overnight. Military personnel now patrolled the corridors, specialized equipment arrived daily, and new faces appeared at every briefing. The quiet geological survey had become something closer to a war room. Michael's new security clearance granted him access to the sealed archives, 5 years of encounters with the entities they now officially designated as non-terrestrial subterranean entities, though everyone still called them diggers. He spent days reviewing footage, reports, and analyses, building a mental map of what they knew and the disturbing vastness of what they didn't. "You look like you haven't slept," observed Diane Kellerman. Finding him in the data center well past midnight, she placed a cup of coffee next to his terminal, the steam rising like a ghost in the blue light of the screens. "Probably because I haven't," Michael replied, rubbing his eyes. "There's something here I can't quite see yet." A pattern within the pattern. Diane glanced at his screen, a collage of tunnel cross-sections from different sites. "You're looking at the architecture?" "The variations." Michael pointed to subtle differences in diameter and wall composition. "They've evolved. The early tunnels were rougher, less precise. The newer ones are perfect. They're improving their technique." "Learning," Diane said quietly. "Exactly." Michael pulled up another file. "And there's more. Look at the inventory of what they've taken from each site." The list scrolled down the screen. Power cables, transmitters, memory storage devices, aluminum components, rare earth minerals from specialized equipment, gold connectors, copper wiring, silicon chips. "They're selective," Michael continued. "They don't just take everything. They want specific materials, specific technologies. Building something," Diane suggested. "That's my theory." "But what?" The question haunted the entire operation as they established monitoring stations along the resonance line, placing sensors deeper and in greater numbers than ever before. Whatever the diggers were constructing, the SACD was determined to find it. 2 weeks after the Site 37 breach, Dr. Foster introduced a new specialist to the core team. Dr. Jared Wilson stood out immediately, younger than most senior personnel, with an energy that bordered on manic and a tendency to speak in rapid bursts that left listeners struggling to keep up. Quantum physicist, theoretical technology, Dr. Foster explained briefly. He's been analyzing the pattern of what the diggers take versus what they leave behind. Dr. Wilson wasted no time reorganizing the data analysis protocols, implementing what he called adaptive predictive modeling to anticipate the diggers' next moves. His insights proved valuable almost immediately. They're not random scavengers, he explained during his first briefing. There's a technological logic to their selections. They're building something with specific transmission capabilities. Like a radio? Asked Colonel Hayes skeptically. Much more sophisticated. Dr. Wilson projected a theoretical schematic he had constructed based on the components taken. This is just an approximation, but it appears to be a device capable of generating and modulating quantum fields, something that could, theoretically, affect the fundamental properties of matter and energy within a localized space. A weapon? The colonel's interest sharpened visibly. Or a tool, countered Dr. Foster. We shouldn't assume hostile intent without evidence. 17 breaches into secure facilities seems pretty hostile to me, muttered someone in the back. The debate about the diggers' intentions grew more heated. As new incidents occurred, 3 more breaches along the resonance line in the span of a month. Each followed the same pattern: perfect tunnels, selective removal of technology, and no direct sighting of the entities themselves. Michael joined field teams investigating each site, developing a reputation for finding subtle clues others missed. At a breached meteorological station in Indiana, he discovered microscopic residue along the tunnel walls that laboratory analysis revealed to contain trace amounts of organic material mixed with unknown metallic compounds. Not fully mechanical, not fully biological, concluded the lab report. A hybrid technology beyond current scientific classification. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a routine perimeter check at a monitoring station established in an abandoned coal mine in southern Indiana. Michael had deployed a new acoustic mapping system Dr. Wilson had developed, a device that used low-frequency sound waves to create 3-dimensional maps of subsurface structures up to a kilometer away. As they activated it, Diane's seismic monitors detected the now familiar vibrations, the heartbeat they'd first encountered at Site 37. "They're here," she whispered, eyes fixed on her display. Instead of evacuation, which had been the standard protocol when digger activity was detected, Dr. Foster made an unprecedented decision. "Maintain position," she ordered. "Continue the acoustic mapping." "With respect, Doctor," Colonel Hayes objected, "we should withdraw and observe remotely." "They've never approached an active site before," Dr. Foster countered. "This is different. They're responding to the acoustic system specifically." Her eyes gleamed with the intensity Michael had come to recognize as her scientific curiosity overriding caution. "They're curious about it." For tense minutes, the team monitored the vibrations, which maintained a steady distance of approximately 200 meters. Then something changed. "The pattern is shifting," Diane reported, her voice tight with concentration. "It's synchronizing with our signal." Dr. Wilson rushed to the acoustic mapping system, studying its output with growing excitement. "They're matching our frequency exactly, then introducing variations. It's a response pattern, a dialogue." "Can we answer back?" Dr. Foster asked. "Theoretically, yes." Dr. Wilson's fingers flew over the controls. "I can modify the output to mirror their variations, then introduce our own pattern, something mathematically significant that would indicate intelligence." "Do it," authorized Dr. Foster, overriding Colonel Hayes' objection with a sharp glance. For the next 6 hours, the team engaged in what could only be described as a conversation conducted entirely in patterns of sound waves. They transmitted mathematical sequences, prime numbers, the Fibonacci series, the value of pi to 100 decimal places, and received increasingly complex responses. Michael watched the exchanges with growing unease. While the others saw scientific breakthrough, he sensed something more calculated in the diggers' responses, as if they were not just communicating, but testing, probing for weaknesses or specific information. "They're leading us somewhere," he said during a brief break, as Dr. Foster and Dr. Wilson analyzed the latest exchange. "These aren't random responses. They're guiding the conversation." "Of course they are," Dr. Wilson replied without looking up. "That's how communication works. We're establishing common reference points." "No, I mean literally." Michael pointed to a sequence of pulses that had recurred several times. "This pattern keeps appearing. I think it's coordinates." That got their attention. Dr. Foster converted the sequence using various numerical systems until one yielded a coherent result, latitude and longitude, for a location less than a mile from their current position, an abandoned limestone quarry that had been out of operation for decades. "It could be a trap," warned Colonel Hayes when informed of the discovery. "Or a meeting place," countered Dr. Foster. "The first opportunity for direct contact." The debate continued long into the night, with the military contingent advocating for a heavily armed reconnaissance, while the scientific team pushed for a more careful, observational approach. No one suggested ignoring the invitation altogether. As the operation prepared for what Dr. Foster was already calling First Contact Protocol, Michael found himself increasingly troubled. In the data center, he reviewed everything they knew about the diggers one more time, looking for something he might have missed. A file from the earliest incident caught his attention, an anomalous energy reading detected just before the first tunnel had been discovered. It hadn't recurred in later breaches and had been dismissed as equipment malfunction. But comparing it to recent data from the acoustic exchange, Michael found a correlation that sent a chill through him. "They've been broadcasting all along," he murmured to the empty room. "We just weren't listening on the right frequency." He compiled his findings and headed to Dr. Foster's office, determined to share his concerns before they proceeded with any contact attempt. But passing the equipment bay, he paused. The preliminary scanning device they'd planned to deploy at the quarry sat unattended, prepped and ready for the morning operation. Michael hesitated only briefly before making his decision. Protocol dictated waiting for the full team for proper authorization, but if his analysis was correct, they needed this information immediately. A quick reconnaissance, just to confirm his theory. He'd be back before anyone knew he was gone. He signed out a vehicle, using his new security clearance, and drove through the night toward the coordinates, the scanning device secure in the passenger seat. The decision felt right, necessary, though later, in the nightmares that would plague him for years, it would become the moment everything changed. The moment he should have walked away, but didn't. As Michael's headlights swept across the access road to the abandoned quarry, he failed to notice the subtle vibration beginning in the earth beneath his tires, a rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat, growing stronger with each passing second. Whatever waited in the darkness ahead had been waiting a very long time. The abandoned limestone quarry loomed like a pale scar in the darkness, its sheer white walls reflecting the moonlight. Years of rainfall had transformed the excavation into a perfectly still lake surrounded by tiered rock faces. No sound disturbed the night, no insects, no distant traffic, not even wind in the scattered trees that had taken root along the quarry's edge. Michael parked at the access road's terminus and gathered his equipment, the scanning device, a tactical flashlight, a satellite phone, and a sidearm he hoped he wouldn't need. Standard protocol for solo reconnaissance. Though there was nothing standard about this situation. The unusual warmth of the October night created wisps of fog that danced across the water's surface, giving the scene an otherworldly quality. Michael's footsteps crunched on loose gravel as he approached the quarry's edge, each sound seeming unnaturally loud in the perfect stillness. He set up the scanning device on a stable outcropping overlooking the water. The unit hummed to life, deploying its sensor array and beginning to gather data on subsurface structures, energy signatures, and material composition. Michael checked the satellite phone. Full signal, direct line to SCD headquarters. He was breaking protocol, but he wasn't being reckless. The initial readings appeared on the scanner's display. Water depth averaging 47 meters. Sediment layer approximately 2 meters thick. Bedrock beneath largely homogeneous limestone with typical karst features. Nothing unusual. Then the device pinged, indicating a deviation, a thermal anomaly at the center of the quarry lake, approximately 30 meters below the surface. The water there was exactly 7.89 degrees warmer than the surrounding area, forming a perfect column from the lake bed upward. "That's not natural," Michael murmured, adjusting the scanner for more detailed analysis. The thermal column contained trace minerals not present in the surrounding water. Iron, copper, rare earth elements. The same materials the diggers had taken from CD monitoring stations. And there was something else, a faint energy signature emanating from the anomaly, cycling at precise intervals. Michael activated the satellite phone, prepared to report his findings, when he felt it, not the usual vibration, but a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It penetrated his body, reverberating in his chest cavity and inner ear, with a sensation that wasn't quite sound and wasn't quite pressure. The water in the quarry began to ripple, then churn, not from the edges but from the center, directly above the thermal anomaly. The concentric ripples moved with mathematical precision, each perfectly spaced from the next, like the visualized frequency of a pure tone. Michael's hand froze above the phone's keypad. Every instinct told him to make the call, to alert headquarters, to withdraw to a safe distance, but a deeper compulsion held him transfixed. The scientist's eternal curse of needing to know, to see, to understand. The churning intensified, water spiraling upward at the center of the lake, defying gravity and fluid dynamics. The surface bulged upward, stretching like a membrane before finally parting to reveal nothing Michael's mind could immediately categorize. It rose from the water with fluid grace, its surface gleaming with metallic iridescence that shifted constantly through spectrums beyond natural coloration. Not solid, not liquid, but something between states, a controlled flow of material that continuously reshaped itself while maintaining a central structure. Parts of it incorporated recognizable human technology, sections of monitoring equipment, computer components, metal structural elements. But these weren't attached to the entity. They were being continuously absorbed and reformed within its shifting mass. It ascended nearly 30 feet above the water's surface, forming what Michael's shocked mind could only interpret as a tower or antenna of some kind. And then it began to resonate. The hum that had been building in Michael's body suddenly intensified, transforming into something beyond sound, pure information transmitted directly to his consciousness. It wasn't pain that dropped him to his knees, but overwhelming input, as if every neuron in his brain were firing simultaneously. Images flooded his mind. Vast networks of tunnels, spanning not just the United States, but the entire planet, forming patterns that corresponded to geological features, electromagnetic fields, and other variables his human perception couldn't fully grasp. Strange structures built into the roots of mountains, and beneath ocean floors, constructions of metal and stone and organic material that pulsed with energy, collecting and transmitting information across vast distances. Glimpses of entities that moved through solid matter as easily as humans move through air, not with the brute force of drilling, but by temporarily altering the fundamental properties of both their bodies and the surrounding material. And behind it all, a singular purpose that Michael understood with sudden, horrifying clarity. They weren't invaders, they were refugees, ancient inhabitants of Earth's deep places. They had retreated further as human civilization expanded, mining deeper, building subways and bunkers, conducting underground nuclear tests, fracking for oil and gas. Each human incursion had disrupted their domain, forcing them deeper, limiting their movements, cutting off ancient migration routes and communication channels. Now, driven by desperation, as human activities increasingly threatened their very existence, They were building something, a beacon, a message, reaching out not to us, but beyond our world, calling for others to come. The entity in the quarry was a prototype, a test of the technology they were assembling, piece by piece from human components. The final version would be much larger, much more powerful, capable of sending a signal that would penetrate not just rock and water, but the very fabric of space-time. And embedded within the signal, carried in frequencies humans couldn't detect, was a message of pure existential terror. Help us. They are destroying everything. Come quickly. Come in force. The realization broke Michael's paralysis. He lunged for the satellite phone, desperate to warn headquarters, to tell them what he'd learned. But as his fingers touched the device, it transformed in his hand. The plastic and metal flowing like wax, components rearranging themselves into something new, something alien. The scanner followed, its structure rippling and reshaping. Even the metal buttons on Michael's jacket began to soften and pull away from the fabric, drawn toward the new configurations forming in his hands. He stumbled backward, dropping everything, but it was too late. The transformed technology rose into the air, floating toward the towering entity in the quarry. As the components were absorbed into its iridescent mass, Michael felt the resonance change, the information flow reversing direction. Now the entity was showing him more. The others who would answer their call, entities vastly different from the diggers, vastly more powerful, beings that had evolved in environments humans would consider impossible. With physical forms and technologies beyond comprehension, they would come not as saviors but as exterminators, viewing the human infestation as a plague to be cleansed from the planet's surface so that their ancient allies could reclaim their rightful domain. The Earth transformed, oceans boiling, atmosphere altered, surface scoured of human civilization, new structures rising that served purposes no human mind could fathom. The vision was so vivid, so detailed, that Michael couldn't tell if he was being shown a prediction or a memory, as if these events had already happened, were happening now, would always happen in some inevitable cycle. As suddenly as it had begun, the resonance ceased. The entity in the quarry collapsed in on itself, flowing back into the water with impossible speed and grace. The surface settled, ripples fading to perfect stillness once more, as if nothing had disturbed it. Michael remained kneeling at the quarry's edge, his mind struggling to process what he'd experienced. The scanner and satellite phone lay before him, transformed into devices of unknown purpose, still faintly humming with energy. His watch had stopped, though whether minutes or hours had passed, he couldn't tell. Only one thought penetrated the chaos in his mind. They know we're watching them now, and they want us to understand exactly what's coming. Dawn was breaking when the SCD recovery team found him, still in the same position, staring at the now placid water. Dr. Foster rushed to him, medical kit in hand, concern etched on her face. "Torres, what happened? Why did you come out here alone?" Michael looked up at her, his eyes focusing with difficulty. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, as if he'd been screaming for hours. "They're building a beacon," he said, "and we need to stop them before they finish it." The transformed devices were carefully collected and sealed in containment units. Michael was loaded onto a stretcher despite his protests that he could walk. As the team prepared to evacuate, Dr. Foster lingered at the quarry's edge, studying the water with an expression Michael couldn't read. Fear mingled with something that looked disturbingly like wonder. "What did you see?" she asked him quietly, as they loaded him into the transport. Michael closed his eyes, the vision still burning in his mind. "The end," he replied simply, "and the beginning." For 72 hours after the quarry incident, Michael underwent continuous medical and psychological evaluation. Electrodes monitored his brain activity, while specialists questioned him repeatedly about what he had experienced. Behind one-way glass, Dr. Foster watched with Colonel Hayes and a team of analysts, their expressions growing grimmer with each passing hour. "His neural patterns are unlike anything I've seen," reported the neurologist, a Dr. Patel whom Michael had never met before. "Increased activity in regions associated with pattern recognition, spatial awareness, and abstract reasoning. It's as if parts of his brain that normally operate independently are now functioning in concert. Is he dangerous? Colonel Hayes asked bluntly. Dr. Patel hesitated. To himself or others? No, but his perception has been altered. He's processing information differently now. In the examination room, Michael sat perfectly still, conserving his energy. The constant questioning exhausted him, but that wasn't why he remained motionless. He was listening, not to the people around him, but to something deeper. A faint resonance that hadn't faded since the quarry. It hummed at the edge of perception, carrying fragments of information he couldn't quite grasp. On the fourth day, Dr. Foster entered alone, dismissing the medical staff with a gesture. She sat across from Michael, studying him with the analytical gaze he'd come to know well. They don't believe you, she said finally. Hayes thinks you hallucinated the entire encounter, that the stress of unauthorized fieldwork triggered some kind of psychotic break. Michael nodded slowly. And you, I believe you experienced something profound. She leaned forward. The devices you brought back, they've been transformed in ways our best engineers can't explain. Something rewrote their fundamental structure at the molecular level. That's not hallucination. She placed a tablet before him, displaying images of the scanner and satellite phone. They had indeed been transformed into something unrecognizable. Asymmetrical configurations of metal and plastic that somehow retained a sense of purpose, of design intelligence. They're still active, Dr. Foster continued, emitting signals on frequencies we can barely detect, let alone interpret. Dr. Wilson thinks they might be relay nodes, amplifying a transmission from somewhere else. The beacon, Michael said, his voice rough from disuse. It's already begun. Dr. Foster studied him intently. Tell me again what you saw. Everything in detail. This time, Michael didn't hold back. He described the entity's appearance in precise technical terms, the resonance that had invaded his consciousness, and most importantly, the visions it had shared, the ancient history of the diggers, their desperate plan, and the terrible response they were summoning from beyond. As he spoke, Dr. Foster's expression shifted from scientific curiosity to growing alarm. By the time he finished, she was pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. If what you're saying is true, she said carefully, then we're facing an extinction-level threat. Yes. And the diggers, they showed you this deliberately? They wanted you to know? Michael nodded. I think they're divided. Some want the others to come to save them from us, but some understand what that would mean for this planet. They're trying to warn us. Dr. Foster was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. I need to take this to Hayes, to the Oversight Committee. This changes everything. They won't believe you either, Michael said quietly. Not without proof. Then we'll get proof. She stood. Decision made. I'm releasing you from medical observation. You're being reassigned to a special research team, effective immediately. We're going to find this beacon before it's completed. The next week passed in a blur of activity. The SCD's resources were redirected toward locating the diggers' primary construction site, the place where the components they had collected were being assembled into the final beacon. Dr. Wilson led the technical analysis, developing new detection methods based on the signals emitted by the transformed devices from the quarry. Michael worked alongside them, but found himself increasingly distracted. The resonance in his mind was growing stronger, more coherent. Sometimes he would stop mid-sentence, head tilted as if listening to a distant voice. The others pretended not to notice, but he caught their concerned glances, their whispered conversations. Only Diane treated him normally, joining him late one night in the data center as he pored over geological survey maps, trying to predict where the diggers might establish their main facility. You're different, she observed, not unkindly. Since the quarry. Michael nodded, not looking up. They changed something in me, not physically, but he struggled to find words for the sensation. It's like they tuned me to their frequency. I can feel them moving, building. Sometimes I catch glimpses of what they're seeing. Instead of the skepticism he expected, Diane simply asked, "What are they seeing now?" Michael closed his eyes, focusing on the faint resonance. Darkness. pressure, moving through solid rock like it's water. They're gathering, bringing pieces from different collection points to a central location. His eyes snapped open. They're accelerating the timeline. Something's made them desperate. Us, Diane suggested. They know we're looking for them now. Before Michael could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing doors and initiating data backups. Over the intercom, Colonel Hayes's voice ordered all personnel to secure stations. Michael and Diane rushed to the operations center to find chaos. Analysts shouting over each other, screens displaying emergency alerts from multiple locations. Dr. Foster stood at the center, attempting to restore order. "Report," she demanded as Michael approached. Dr. Wilson responded, his usual energy now tinged with fear. "We're detecting breaches at monitoring stations across the entire resonance line. Simultaneous incursions at 14 different sites. They're taking everything, not just selected components." "Show me," ordered Foster. The main display switched to a grid of security feeds from various monitoring stations. Each showed the same scene, perfect circular holes appearing in floors and walls, as if the material were simply ceasing to exist, followed by equipment being drawn into the openings by some invisible force. "My God," whispered Diane. "It's a coordinated attack." "Not attack," Michael corrected, the resonance in his mind suddenly clarifying. "Harvest. Final harvest. They're taking what they need for the last stage." Colonel Hayes had been conferring with military liaisons across the room. Now he approached, his face grim. "The Pentagon is classifying this as a national security threat. They're deploying containment teams to each breach site with orders to capture or neutralize these entities by any means necessary." "That won't work," Michael said sharply. "You can't fight them conventionally. They don't exist in the same physical state we do. We're beyond theoretical debates, Torres," Hayes snapped. "These things have breached secure government facilities across 5 states simultaneously. That's an act of war." "They're not at war with us," Michael insisted, the resonance growing painfully intense. "They're running out of time. The beacon." He broke off suddenly, a new vision flooding his consciousness. In perfect detail, he saw it. A vast underground chamber beneath the Appalachian Mountains in eastern Tennessee, where the resonance line terminated. A structure was taking shape there, assembled from countless technological components harvested from human facilities. It pulsed with energy, growing stronger by the hour, already beginning to emit the signal that would reach across impossible distances. "I know where it is," he gasped, the vision receding. "The beacon. I can see it." All eyes turned to him. Dr. Foster stepped forward. "Where, Michael?" "Eastern Tennessee, below the mountains. I can lead you there." He met her gaze directly. "But we have to go now. They're almost finished." The decision was made in minutes. A strike team was assembled. Dr. Foster, Michael, Dr. Wilson, Diane, Colonel Hayes, and a dozen military specialists equipped with weapons and equipment that Michael suspected would prove useless. Transport was arranged via military helicopter directly to the coordinates Michael provided. As they prepared to depart, Dr. Foster pulled Michael aside. "Are you sure about this? If what you saw at the quarry is accurate, we may be facing something beyond our capability to handle." "I'm sure about where they are," he replied. "What happens when we get there?" He shook his head. "The resonance is getting stronger, but also more confused. I think they know we're coming, and they're divided about how to respond." "Divided how?" Michael struggled to interpret the conflicting impressions flooding his mind. Some want to complete the beacon at any cost. Others are afraid of what they're summoning. They showed me what would happen, not as a threat, but as a warning. So we might have allies down there. Maybe, or maybe they're all our enemies now, and I'm just picking up their doubts. Michael checked his equipment one last time. Either way, we're running out of time. The helicopter flight took 3 hours, carrying them from Minnesota across multiple states to the mountainous terrain of eastern Tennessee. Michael sat silently throughout the journey, eyes closed, following the growing resonance like a beacon of its own. The others watched him uneasily, Colonel Hayes in particular, keeping a wary eye on him, as if expecting some sudden transformation. They landed at a remote military outpost where ground transport awaited. Specialized vehicles equipped for rough terrain, Michael directed them to an unremarkable wooded area, miles from any town or major road, where a weathered "No Trespassing" sign marked the entrance to an abandoned mining operation. "This is it?" Colonel Hayes asked skeptically, as they stood before a collapsed mine entrance overgrown with decades of vegetation. "Not here," Michael said, already walking away from the obvious entrance. "There's another way in, one they created." He led them a quarter mile, through dense forest to a small clearing, where the ground showed no visible disturbance. Yet Michael stopped precisely at its center, the resonance now a physical pressure in his skull. "Here," he said. "They come and go from here." Dr. Wilson deployed scanning equipment that confirmed an anomalous cavity approximately 30 feet below their position, though it detected no entrance or tunnel leading to it. "How do we get down there?" Dr. Foster asked. Michael knelt, placing his palm flat against the ground. The resonance surged in response, and he felt a strange sensation, as if something below were reaching up to him, recognizing his presence. "I think," he said slowly, "they're going to let us in." Before anyone could question him further, the ground beneath them changed, not opening, not collapsing, but transforming, becoming momentarily insubstantial, a state of matter beyond solid, liquid, or gas. For a sickening instant, they experienced free fall, then impact as they landed roughly in a perfectly circular tunnel 30 feet below the surface. Colonel Hayes' team immediately formed a defensive perimeter, weapons ready, lights sweeping the smooth walls of the tunnel. Dr. Foster helped Diane to her feet, while Dr. Wilson already had instruments out, taking readings with shaking hands. "The material composition is changing even as I measure it," he reported, voice tight with scientific excitement, despite the circumstances. "It's returning to a solid state through some process I can't even begin to classify." "Which way?" Dr. Foster asked Michael, who stood motionless, eyes unfocused. He pointed without hesitation. "The beacon is that way, about 2 miles. He turned to meet her gaze, his expression grave. "And they know we're here." Colonel Hayes gave orders, and the team began moving through the tunnel in tactical formation. Michael walked at the center of the group, protected but also contained, a guide they didn't fully trust. As they progressed deeper beneath the Appalachian Mountains, the resonance in Michael's mind became a symphony of alien thoughts and emotions: fear, determination, hope, desperation. The diggers were indeed divided, some welcoming the human intruders as a last hope for intervention, others viewing them as the final threat to their survival plan. And beneath it all, growing stronger with every step, the beacon called to something vast and distant and utterly inhuman, a signal that was beginning to receive its first faint answer from the dark between stars. "We need to hurry," Michael said, breaking into a run. "Something's coming." The tunnel widened as they descended deeper, its perfectly smooth walls beginning to display patterns, swirling iridescence like oil on water, pulsing with subtle light that required no external source. Dr. Wilson recorded everything, his instruments struggling to classify what they detected. "The walls themselves are conducting energy," he reported, voice hushed with wonder. "Some kind of quantum field effect. It's like the entire structure is one massive circuit." Colonel Hayes was less impressed. "Stay focused on potential threats. We have no idea what's waiting for us." "They're not waiting," Michael said, the resonance in his mind growing clearer. "They're working. Finishing the beacon. Some want to stop us. Others." He paused, sorting through the alien impressions flooding his consciousness. "Others hope we'll succeed where they failed." "Failed at what?" Dr. Foster asked. "Stopping the signal." The tunnel curved downward more steeply, then opened suddenly into a vast underground chamber that drew gasps from even the most composed members of the team. They stood at the edge of a space so large their lights couldn't reach the far walls or ceiling. A cathedral carved from solid rock, smooth as glass, and shimmering with the same iridescent patterns as the tunnel. but it was what occupied the center of the chamber that commanded their attention. Rising from the floor like a tower from some alien cityscape was a structure approximately 50 meters tall, its surface in constant motion, flowing, reshaping, incorporating new elements even as they watched. Parts of it were recognizable as human technology: computer servers, satellite components, miles of copper wiring, and countless smaller devices, all partially absorbed into the greater whole. Other parts were utterly foreign. Crystalline structures that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, materials that shifted between solid and energy states, and pulsing nodes of pure light contained within geometric lattices, impossible to fully comprehend. At the base of the structure moved the entities themselves, the diggers, not machines as many had speculated, not creatures in any conventional sense, but something between flowing masses of iridescent material, similar to what they'd seen at the quarry, but more varied, more individualized. They manipulated the beacon with extensions of their substance, adding components, adjusting configurations, working with single-minded purpose. "My God," whispered Diane. "There are hundreds of them." "All this was under our feet," Dr. Foster said, her scientific detachment momentarily shattered by the scale of what they were witnessing. An entire civilization. Colonel Hayes was already communicating the discovery to his superiors via a secured line, requesting additional forces and containment protocols. Dr. Wilson simply stood frozen, his instruments forgotten in his hands, overwhelmed by the technological implications before him. Michael barely heard any of them. The resonance had become overwhelming, a cacophony of alien thoughts crashing against his consciousness. But through the chaos, patterns emerged: urgent communications, warnings, pleading. Several of the diggers had noticed their arrival and were reacting with what he could only interpret as alarm. Not fear of the humans, but fear of what would happen if the beacon activated with them present. "We need to leave," Michael said suddenly, grabbing Dr. Foster's arm. "Now, they're about to..." He never finished the sentence. A pulse of energy surged through the chamber, emanating from the beacon with such intensity that the air itself seemed to ripple. Everyone was driven to their knees, equipment shorting out in cascades of sparks. Only Michael remained partially aware, the resonance in his mind shifting to a single unified thought. "It begins." The beacon's surface stopped its constant flow, crystallizing into a final configuration that pulsed with increasing energy. At its apex, a concentration of light formed. Not illumination, but something more fundamental, as if a small piece of a star had been captured and contained. Through the resonance, Michael understood what was happening. The first true signal, powerful enough to reach beyond the solar system, was about to be transmitted, and when it was, the humans present would be altered in ways even the diggers couldn't fully predict. "Fall back," Michael shouted over the rising hum that filled the chamber. "Get everyone out of here." Colonel Hayes needed no further convincing. He ordered an immediate retreat, his team practically dragging the scientists back toward the tunnel entrance. Dr. Foster resisted, her scientific curiosity warring with self-preservation. "We can't leave," she argued, as Michael pulled her along. "This is first contact, the discovery of a lifetime." "It's not first contact," Michael countered grimly. "It's a distress call, and we don't want to be here when it's answered." They had almost reached the tunnel when the beacon reached critical energy levels. The chamber filled with blinding light as a concentrated beam shot upward, seemingly passing through solid rock as if it weren't there. The signal had been activated. Simultaneously, several digger entities broke away from the main group and flowed rapidly toward the retreating humans. Colonel Hayes' team took defensive positions, weapons trained on the approaching entities. "Don't shoot," Michael shouted, the resonance allowing him to interpret their intent. "They're trying to help us." The entities reached them moments before the full force of the signal impact. They surrounded the humans, their substance flowing around and over them in a protective barrier. Michael felt the resonance intensify to near painful levels as the entities communicated directly into his mind. "We shield you. The others come. Must leave. Must warn." The signal's full activation hit like a physical wave. Even through the diggers' protection, the humans experienced disorientation and nausea. Electronic equipment, not already disabled, failed completely. The very air seemed electrified, charged with potential. And then, abruptly, everything stopped. The diggers withdrew, flowing back toward the main chamber with startling speed. The resonance in Michael's mind didn't fade, but clarified, becoming a stream of coherent information. Signal sent, response detected, 17 cycles, until arrival. Not enough time. You must prepare. We have shown one who can hear. Now we must hide. Before anyone could react, the tunnel entrance sealed itself, the material flowing like liquid before resolidifying. They were cut off from the chamber, from the beacon, from the diggers, left in a smooth, dead-end corridor with no apparent way out. What just happened? Colonel Hayes demanded, rounding on Michael. What did those things do to us? Saved our lives, Michael replied simply, and gave us a warning. It took hours for them to find another way out, eventually discovering a secondary tunnel that led to an abandoned mine shaft miles from where they had entered. By the time they reached the surface, military reinforcements had arrived, establishing a perimeter around the entire area. But initial surveys showed nothing beneath the mountains. No chamber, no beacon, no sign of the diggers or their technology. They had vanished as completely as if they had never existed, taking their creation with them deeper into the earth. During debriefing at a hastily established command center, Michael explained what he had learned through the resonance. The beacon had been activated successfully. It had sent its signal and, more disturbingly, had received a response. Something was coming. Entities even the diggers feared, and humanity had approximately 17 cycles to prepare, though the precise meaning of this time frame remained unclear. This is beyond our current operational parameters, Colonel Hayes admitted during an emergency video conference with Pentagon officials. We're dealing with a potentially non-terrestrial threat of unknown capabilities and intentions. Not unknown, Michael corrected. They showed me. These entities view Earth as a resource, humanity as an infestation. They're coming to help the diggers reclaim their domain, which means removing us from the equation. The resulting debate split along predictable lines. Military leaders advocating immediate defensive preparations, scientists pushing for continued attempts at communication with the diggers, government officials concerned with containing public knowledge of the situation. Through it all, Michael remained strangely detached. The resonance persisted in his mind, fainter now but still present, carrying fragments of information from the retreating diggers. They were dispersing, hiding in the deepest parts of the Earth's crust, some still working to strengthen the beacon for subsequent transmissions, others attempting to develop countermeasures against what they had summoned. A civilization at war with itself, with humanity caught in the middle. 1 week after the Tennessee incident, as the government scrambled to establish a response protocol, Michael was summoned to a private meeting with Dr. Foster. He found her in her office, surrounded by stacks of classified reports, and looking as if she hadn't slept in days. "They're shutting us down," she said without preamble. "The entire SCD operation is being classified and folded into a new organization, the Extraterrestrial Preparedness Initiative. Direct Pentagon oversight, unlimited funding, and absolutely no connection to our previous work. They're erasing the evidence," Michael concluded, controlling the narrative. Dr. Foster rubbed her eyes wearily. "Hayes has been promoted to oversee the military response. I've been offered a position at a classified research facility to study the artifacts we recovered. And you," she slid a document across her desk, "they want you under continuous observation. The resonance in your mind makes you both valuable and a potential security risk." Michael scanned the document. An assignment to a secured facility in Nevada, where he would assist in interpreting any further communications from the diggers while being studied by a team of specialists. Comfortable confinement under another name. "And if I decline?" Dr. Foster's expression answered before her words. "This isn't a request, Michael. What happened to you at the quarry? What you can perceive now, it makes you unique, and uniqueness in this context means you don't really have choices anymore." Michael nodded slowly. having expected nothing less. What about the others? Diane? Dr. Wilson? Diane's taking a position at CD, officially to search for conventional extraterrestrial signals, unofficially to develop better detection methods for the Diggers' technology. Dr. Foster hesitated. Wilson suffered some kind of breakdown after Tennessee. He's been hospitalized. The resonance affected him differently. He couldn't process what he was experiencing. And you? Will you take the research position? I don't see that I have much choice either. She gestured to the stacks of reports. We opened this door, Michael. We need to help find a way to close it again, before whatever's coming arrives. 3 days later, as Michael was being transported to the Nevada facility, he felt the resonance shift suddenly, a surge of alien emotion, fear, urgency, warning, followed by a series of images so vivid they caused his escort to pull over when he gasped aloud. He saw structures similar to the beacon emerging at sites across the globe, each one broadcasting the same signal into space, not just America, but locations in Siberia, the Amazon, Central Africa, the ocean floor, everywhere the Diggers had established colonies. The signal was being amplified, coordinated, reaching farther into the void, and something was answering, something vast and ancient and utterly inhuman. The response was growing stronger, more directed. The 17 cycles suddenly had new meaning in Michael's mind, not days or weeks, as humans measured time, but some alien calculation based on signal propagation through space-time. They had less time than anyone realized. That night, alone in his new quarters at the secured facility, Michael stood at the window looking up at the stars. The resonance hummed steadily in his mind, no longer painful but a constant reminder of how profoundly he had been changed. Among the countless points of light, he wondered which one concealed the approaching threat, or if it came from somewhere beyond the visible spectrum, beyond conventional space itself. His handlers had taken his phone, his computer, any means of outside communication, but they couldn't take the resonance, couldn't prevent the Diggers from continuing to share information with the one human mind attuned to their frequency. In the quiet darkness, Michael began to plan. 17 cycles wasn't much time, but it might be enough if he could escape, if he could reach those who would listen, if he could convince the world to prepare, and if not, he pressed his palm against the cool glass, feeling the faint vibration rising through the building's foundation, a reminder that even here, the Diggers moved below, watching, waiting, divided in their hopes for humanity's future. Something is coming. The thought wasn't entirely his own, but he embraced it anyway, accepting his role in whatever came next. The end, or the beginning. 6 months had passed since the government shuttered the Subterranean Cartography Division. Winter had given way to spring, then summer, the world continuing its normal rhythms, even as preparations for an unprecedented threat unfolded in classified facilities across the globe. Michael Torres sat on the porch of his small cabin in the mountains of Montana, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of crimson and gold. After 3 months of observation and testing at the Nevada facility, he had been released under strict conditions, regular medical evaluations, no unauthorized travel, no communication with former SCD colleagues, and absolute silence regarding what he had witnessed. The official story, for the few who even knew to ask, was that the SCD had been disbanded due to budget constraints. Its personnel had been reassigned to various agencies or returned to civilian life. The Diggers, the beacon, the signal, all buried under layers of classification so deep that even most high-ranking officials remained unaware. But the preparations continued. From fragments gathered through the persistent resonance in his mind, Michael knew that the newly formed Extraterrestrial Preparedness Initiative had grown into a massive operation. Military forces were being quietly repositioned, hardened bunkers expanded, contingency plans developed for scenarios ranging from limited contact to full-scale invasion. Dr. Foster had disappeared into a classified research facility, attempting to reverse engineer the technology they had recovered. Diane Kellerman now led a specialized division at SETI, officially searching for conventional extraterrestrial signals, while actually monitoring for anything resembling the beacon's transmission. Dr. Wilson had suffered a complete psychological break after the Tennessee incident and remained institutionalized, his brilliant mind fractured by what it couldn't comprehend. And the diggers continued their work unseen, their vast network expanding beneath every continent, beneath the ocean floors. Some still enhanced and maintained the beacons, committed to summoning their ancient allies no matter the cost to Earth's surface dwellers. Others worked to develop countermeasures, having recognized too late the true nature of what they had called. The division among them had escalated into something like civil war, a conflict fought not with weapons, but with technology and information, each faction attempting to either strengthen or disrupt the signal that reached into deep space. Michael lived in the middle ground between these worlds, too altered to fully rejoin human society, too human to truly understand the diggers. The resonance gave him glimpses of both sides, the frantic human preparations he wasn't supposed to know about, and the alien conflict he couldn't fully comprehend. He had chosen this remote cabin specifically for its isolation. Here, far from population centers and surveillance, he could focus on the resonance without distraction, interpreting the streams of information that flowed through his consciousness. The government minders who checked on him monthly believed he was simply recovering, finding peace in solitude. They didn't realize he was still working, mapping the diggers' movements, tracking the signal's progression, calculating when the response would arrive. Tonight, something had changed. The resonance carried a new urgency, a shift in the alien emotions that colored his perception. Sitting on his porch as darkness fell, Michael closed his eyes and focused, letting the information flow unimpeded. Disruption in space-time. Approach vector detected. 7 rotations remaining. Preparations insufficient. The translation wasn't perfect. The concepts didn't align cleanly with human language, but the meaning was clear enough. 7 days. Whatever was coming would arrive in 7 days, and neither the humans nor the dissenting diggers were ready. Michael opened his eyes to find the first stars appearing overhead, somewhere beyond those familiar constellations. Something vast was moving toward Earth, drawn by the beacon's call, intent on transforming the planet to suit the diggers' needs, with no regard for the species that currently dominated its surface. His satellite phone, the only connection to the outside world permitted under his release conditions, lay on the small table beside him. He was supposed to use it only for scheduled check-ins or emergencies. This certainly qualified as the latter, but who would believe him? His government handlers considered him psychologically compromised, valuable only for the occasional insights the resonance provided when they deigned to listen. As if answering his thoughts, the phone rang. An unexpected sound in the mountain stillness. The display showed a blocked number. "Torres," he answered cautiously. "They're coming." Dr. Foster's voice tense and hurried. "Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting something. Not a conventional spacecraft, not radiation, but some kind of disturbance moving toward us at impossible speeds." Michael wasn't surprised she had contacted him despite the restrictions. Abigail Foster had never been one to follow rules that interfered with her scientific pursuits. 7 days, he confirmed. "I know." A brief silence. "The resonance told you. It's getting stronger, clearer. The diggers are in disarray. The faction that wanted to call their allies is losing control of the situation. They didn't expect the response to come so quickly, or so. We're not ready," Dr. Foster said, echoing the alien sentiment that had flowed through the resonance. "The initiative has weapons, bunkers, contingency plans, but nothing that would work against what you described. We need more time." "We don't have it." Michael stood, gazing up at the darkening sky. "Where are you calling from?" "A secure facility. I can't say more." "Can you get out? Come here?" Even as he asked, he knew the answer. "Impossible. We're on complete lockdown since the anomaly was detected." She paused. "Michael, I didn't just call to warn you. I need your help. The resonance. It's our only real-time connection to the diggers. If the dissenting faction truly wants to stop this, they might know how. We need that information." "And you think I can get it?" "I think you're the only one who can." Michael considered the request. The resonance had always been passive. information flowing to him without his control. He had never attempted to direct it, to actively communicate back through the connection. "I'll try," he promised. "But Foster, prepare for the worst. Whatever's coming, I don't think we can stop it." After ending the call, Michael returned to his contemplation of the night sky. The stars seemed suddenly alien, potential harbingers of destruction, rather than the familiar guides they had been throughout human history. Somewhere among them, something approached, something that traveled between worlds, not as humans imagined space travel, but through means beyond current scientific understanding. For the next 3 days, Michael immersed himself completely in the resonance, attempting to push beyond passive reception to active communication. He barely ate or slept, his consciousness stretching toward the alien thoughts that flickered at the edges of his perception. On the 4th day, he succeeded. During a moment of perfect mental stillness, the connection suddenly became bidirectional. He sensed surprise from the diggers. This development was unprecedented, a human mind capable of projecting through the resonance rather than merely receiving it. How can we stop them? Michael projected the concept as clearly as possible, focusing on images of cooperation, of mutual survival. The response came not in words, but in a flood of technical information, specifications for a device that could disrupt the beacon's signal, severing the connection that guided the approaching entities. The dissenting diggers had developed the technology, but lacked the ability to implement it at all beacon sites simultaneously. They needed human assistance, human coordination. Michael immediately contacted Dr. Foster, transmitting everything he had learned. For the first time since Tennessee, he felt a flicker of hope. If they could build these disruption devices, if they could deploy them globally in the next 3 days, his optimism was short-lived. On the 5th day, the resonance surged with alien panic. The approaching entities had accelerated, somehow detecting the planned counterattack. The 7-day timeline had collapsed. They were coming now. That night, strange auroras appeared in skies worldwide, not just near the poles, but across all latitudes. Curtains of light in impossible colors that moved with purpose rather than following magnetic field lines. The official explanation cited unusual solar activity, but Michael knew better. The atmospheric disturbances were side effects of something massive approaching Earth, something that distorted the very fabric of reality around it. On the 6th day, the resonance became a cacophony of alien terror. Even the diggers who had summoned their ancient allies now recognized the mistake they had made. The approaching entities weren't coming as saviors, but as conquerors, viewing both surface dwellers and subterranean inhabitants as resources to be harvested, the entire planet as raw material for purposes incomprehensible to either humans or diggers. Global communications began to fail as the atmospheric disturbances intensified. Electrical grids fluctuated, navigation systems gave impossible readings, and electronic devices activated without human input. The world's governments struggled to maintain order while implementing emergency protocols developed by the initiative, but panic was spreading as the truth became impossible to conceal. Something was coming, something beyond human understanding, on what should have been the 7th day. Michael woke before dawn to an unnatural silence. No birds sang in the surrounding forest, no insects chirped. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, the air unnaturally still and heavy with potential. He stepped onto his porch, just as the first light of dawn should have appeared in the eastern sky. Instead, he found the stars vanishing one by one, as if systematically erased from existence, not obscured by clouds, not fading with daylight, but simply ceasing to be visible, replaced by an absolute darkness that spread across the sky like spilled ink. At the horizon, where the sun should have been rising, a different kind of light appeared. Not the warm glow of dawn, but something colder, more precise. A perfect circle of luminescence that expanded slowly, its edges sharply defined against the unnatural darkness surrounding it. The resonance in Michael's mind reached a crescendo, a unified chorus of digger consciousness, broadcasting a single concept. They are here. His satellite phone rang, the sound jarring in the preternatural quiet. Dr. Foster's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Are you seeing this?" "Yes," Michael replied simply, unable to take his eyes off the expanding circle of light. "It's happening everywhere?" Global reports confirm similar phenomena over every major population center. Military forces are mobilizing, but she hesitated. "We don't know what we're mobilizing against. The disruption devices aren't ready. We need more time." "We're out of time," Michael said, the resonance confirming his worst fears. "This isn't an invasion in any conventional sense. They don't want our resources or our territory. They want reality itself, the fundamental properties of matter and energy that make Earth what it is." As if confirming his words, the circle of light at the horizon pulsed, and Michael felt a wave of something pass through him. Not radiation, not sound, but a distortion in the basic physical laws that governed existence. For a brief, nauseating moment, his body felt simultaneously solid and liquid, present and absent. His consciousness stretched across impossible distances before snapping back into his physical form. "They're reshaping our reality to match theirs," he gasped when the sensation passed, "making Earth compatible with their existence." Around him, the effect of the pulse became visible. The trees nearest his cabin changed subtly, not in appearance but in substance, as if the matter composing them had been fundamentally altered. When a light breeze finally stirred, one branch swayed and then simply dissolved, its component atoms rearranging into a fine mist that hung motionless in the air. Through the resonance, Michael sensed the diggers responding to the transformation, some fleeing deeper into the Earth's crust, others attempting to communicate with the entities they had summoned, still others reaching out desperately to the surface dwellers they had previously avoided. A second pulse emanated from the circle of light, stronger than the first. This time, Michael wasn't merely affected, he was transformed. The resonance, which had been a passive connection in his mind, suddenly became an active interface. Through it, he could perceive the entities directly, could sense their vast and alien consciousness as they began the systematic conversion of Earth's physical properties. What he witnessed defied human language or comprehension. The entities existed in a state beyond matter and energy. As humans understood them, their bodies composed of reconfigured space-time, their thoughts operating on principles that made quantum mechanics seem simplistic by comparison, and their purpose was clear. Earth would be remade as an outpost, a way station between dimensions, its resources, including all biological life, broken down and repurposed into forms compatible with their existence. It had happened before, on countless worlds across the cosmos. The diggers had simply repeated a pattern, as old as the universe itself, the desperate summoning of beings so far beyond themselves that they couldn't comprehend the consequences until it was too late. Through the enhanced resonance, Michael transmitted everything he was witnessing directly to Dr. Foster, hoping against hope that some last-minute intervention might still be possible. But even as he did so, he knew the truth. The entities operated on a scale that made human resistance meaningless, like bacteria attempting to fight a forest fire. The third pulse came as the circle of light expanded to fill half the sky. This time, the transformation reached deeper, affecting not just physical matter, but consciousness itself. Michael felt his mind stretching, expanding, perceiving aspects of reality that had always existed but remained invisible to human senses. In that expanded state, he suddenly understood what the dissenting diggers had been trying to tell him. The solution they couldn't implement alone. The beacons couldn't be shut down. They were already irrelevant, their purpose fulfilled. But the resonance itself, the connection between minds that transcended physical limitations, could be turned against the entities if enough consciousness, human and digger combined, could synchronize through the resonance. It might create a counterforce, a kind of immune response to the reality distortion being imposed on Earth. Foster, Michael gasped into the phone, fighting to maintain his individuality within the expanding awareness. The resonance, it's the key, not technology, consciousness itself. What are you saying? Her voice seemed to come from a great distance. The diggers who oppose this, they need to join with us to create a unified field of consciousness through the resonance. It might be enough to push back, to preserve our reality. How? We have no way to communicate with them on that scale. You do now. Michael felt his awareness expanding further, the resonance flowing through him in both directions. I'm the conduit. I can connect them to us, all of us, if we act quickly. The conversation that followed was fragmented, urgent, plans formulated and implemented in minutes as the world continued to transform around them. The initiative's global network activated, connecting Michael to sensitive individuals worldwide, people who had reported strange dreams, unexplained sensations, the faint tremors of the resonance, without recognizing what it was. Simultaneously, through Michael's expanded consciousness, the dissenting diggers reached out to their kind globally, creating a network of aligned minds that transcended physical distance. Human and digger, surface and subterranean, joined in a singular purpose: resistance against the fundamental change being imposed upon their shared world. The fourth pulse from the entities came as the network reached critical mass. This time, when the wave of transformation swept over the planet, it met opposition, not physical but mental, a collective assertion of existing reality against the imposed alteration. Michael stood at the center of this psychic battlefield. His consciousness stretched to breaking point as he maintained the connection between two species that had evolved separately on the same planet, now united against an existential threat to both. Through him flowed the combined will of millions of minds, human and digger alike, focused on a single purpose. This world is ours. This reality is ours. You cannot take it from us. The entities, vast and ancient, and previously unchallenged, encountered resistance for the first time in their cosmic existence. The conflict that followed occurred not in physical space, but in the realm of consciousness and reality. Definition: a war fought with will rather than weapons. For what seemed like eternity, Michael held the connection, his physical body barely relevant, as his mind became the battlefield where Earth's future would be decided. Through him, the collective consciousness of two planetary species fought to maintain the reality they shared against beings that existed beyond conventional dimensions. When the fifth pulse came, something unprecedented happened. The wave of transformation faltered, fragmented, and then reversed direction. The circle of light at the horizon contracted, its perfect edges now ragged and unstable. Through the resonance, Michael sensed confusion from the entities, an emotion so alien it barely registered as such. They had never failed before, never encountered a world capable of rejecting their imposed reality. The unified consciousness of humans and diggers presented a problem they had no existing protocol to solve. For the first time in their vast existence, the entities retreated, not in defeat, but in tactical withdrawal, a pause to reconsider their approach to this unexpectedly resistant world. The circle of light collapsed in on itself, vanishing from the horizon with a final pulse that restored normal physical laws to the affected areas. The stars reappeared in the sky one by one, and the first true light of dawn broke over the mountains. Michael collapsed on his porch, his mind snapping back into his body with such force that he lost consciousness. When he awoke hours later, the world appeared normal. The trees solid, the air clear, the sun following its familiar path across the sky. Only the resonance in his mind confirmed that what he had experienced was real, carrying echoes of both triumph and warning. They had succeeded, but not completely. The entities had withdrawn, but not permanently. They would return, better prepared for the resistance they had encountered. The respite might last years or decades in human terms, but it was only temporary. In that time, humans and diggers would need to prepare, not by building weapons or bunkers, but by strengthening the connection between their consciousness, learning to coexist as two intelligent species sharing one planet. Only together could they hope to preserve their reality when the entities returned. The satellite phone lay shattered beside him, destroyed by the reality fluctuations. It didn't matter. The resonance now connected him to both Dr. Foster and the Digger leadership more directly than any technology could. Through it, the unprecedented cooperation between surface and subsurface would begin. Tentative at first, then growing stronger as both species recognized their shared future. As the sun set on that first day of Earth's new era, Michael stood once more on his porch, gazing at the stars that had nearly been erased from existence. The resonance hummed steadily in his mind, carrying information, warnings, plans from both his fellow humans and their unexpected allies below. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the entities continued their journey through the cosmos, altering worlds to suit their incomprehensible purposes. They would return to Earth eventually, drawn by the unique properties that had made it resistant to their first attempt. Michael Torres, once a simple specialist in underground structure assessment, now the nexus between two intelligent species, preparing for an existential threat, watched the familiar constellations and felt the weight of the future pressing upon him. The end of one chapter, the beginning of another, and deep below, the diggers continued their work, no longer hidden from human awareness, no longer enemies but essential partners in the preservation of a shared world against forces that would remake it into something neither species could survive. Something was coming, and this time they would be ready.